I've been trying to work up the courage to share this for a while now. It's been 6 months since it all started, and I still can't wrap my head around what happened. I guess I'm hoping that by writing it all down, maybe someone out there can help me make sense of it. Or at least tell me I'm not going crazy. So, here goes. My name's Sarah, and up until last year, I was just your average 28-year-old trying to figure out life. I had a decent job at a local bookstore, a tiny apartment that I shared with my cat, Mr. Whiskers, and a husband I loved more than anything in the world. Tom and I met in college. He was this goofy guy with messy brown hair and the kindest green eyes you've ever seen. We clicked right away, bonding over our shared love of bad horror movies and even worse puns. We got married 2 years after graduation, in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. For 3 years, life was good. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but we were happy. We were talking about starting a family, maybe buying a house. You know, all those grown-up things you're supposed to do. But then, last year, everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday in October. Tom had gone out to grab some groceries. He was supposed to be back in time for us to watch the latest episode of our favorite show. I remember sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, wondering why he was taking so long. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find 2 police officers standing there, their faces grim. My heart dropped before they even opened their mouths. I knew. Somehow, I just knew. "Mrs. Thompson," one of them asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I'm sorry to inform you, but there's been an accident." The rest of that night is a blur. I remember bits and pieces. The officers telling me that a drunk driver had run a red light, hitting Tom's car. That he died instantly, that they were so sorry. I remember calling Tom's parents, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what happened. I remember my best friend, Lisa, rushing over and holding me as I sobbed until I had no tears left. The funeral was 3 days later. It was a beautiful service, I guess. People kept telling me how lovely it was, how Tom would have appreciated it. But honestly, I barely remember any of it. I was like a zombie, going through the motions, shaking hands and accepting hugs from people whose faces I couldn't even focus on. We buried Tom in Oakwood Cemetery, under a big oak tree. His tombstone was simple, just like he would have wanted. Thomas Thompson, beloved husband and son, 1995 to 2023. For months after, I was lost. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for Tom, only to find his side of the bed cold and empty. I'd catch myself picking up my phone to text him about something funny that happened at work, only to remember he wasn't there to read it. But slowly, painfully, I started to put my life back together. I went back to work. I started seeing a grief counselor. I even managed to smile again, now and then. And then came the day that changed everything. Again, it was the 1-year anniversary of Tom's death. October 15th, 2024, I decided to visit his grave, like I'd been doing every month since the funeral. It was a crisp autumn day, leaves crunching under my feet as I made my way through the cemetery. I brought flowers, sunflowers, Tom's favorite. As I approached his grave, I rehearsed in my head what I was going to say. It sounds silly, but I always felt like I was really talking to him when I visited. But when I got to the grave, the words died in my throat. I blinked. Sure, I must be seeing things. I rubbed my eyes, but the image didn't change. There, on Tom's tombstone, right below his name, was mine. Sarah Thompson, 1995. The date of death was blank, but my name was there, clear as day. Carved into the stone as if it had always been there. I dropped the flowers, my hands shaking. "What the hell?" I whispered, reaching out to touch the stone. It was real. The carving was there, under my fingertips. I looked around wildly, half expecting to see someone jump out and yell "gotcha." But the cemetery was empty. silent except for the rustling of leaves in the wind. I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it as I pulled it out of my pocket. With trembling fingers, I snapped a picture of the tombstone, then another, and another. This can't be real, I muttered to myself. This can't be happening, but it was. And little did I know, it was only the beginning. I'll post the next part soon. Writing this has brought it all back, and I need a minute to collect myself. But there's so much more to tell. God, I hope someone out there can help me make sense of this. After I found my name on Tom's tombstone, I kind of lost it. I mean, wouldn't you? I remember sitting on the ground next to his grave, my brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I must have been there for hours, because when I finally snapped out of it, the sun was setting. I stumbled home in a daze. As soon as I got in, I called Lisa. "Sarah, what's wrong?" she asked as soon as she picked up. I guess my voice gave me away. "Lisa, I need you to come over, please. Something's happened." She was at my door in 15 minutes. I showed her the pictures on my phone, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Sarah, this isn't possible." "I know," I said, my voice cracking. "But it's there. Lisa, I touched it. It's real." We spent the next few hours calling everyone we could think of. The cemetery office closed for the day. The company that made Tom's headstone also closed. Even the police, who basically told us that unless someone was actively trying to kill me, there wasn't much they could do. Lisa offered to stay the night, but I told her I'd be okay. Big mistake. As soon as she left, the apartment felt different, colder, somehow, like all the warmth had been sucked out of it. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but I couldn't focus. Every little noise made me jump. Around midnight, I finally decided to try and get some sleep. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. But as I was brushing my teeth, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps, coming from the living room. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. It couldn't be Mr. Whiskers. He was curled up on my bed, and I lived alone. The footsteps got closer. Slow, heavy steps. Like someone was taking their time, knowing I had nowhere to run. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked around frantically for something. Anything I could use as a weapon. I grabbed my hairdryer. Not ideal, but better than nothing. The footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom door. I held my breath, gripping the hairdryer so tight my knuckles turned white. Then, I heard it, a voice. Soft, familiar, impossible. "Sarah." It was Tom's voice. I dropped the hairdryer, the crash echoing in the tiny bathroom. This couldn't be happening. Tom was dead. I'd watched them lower his coffin into the ground. "Sarah, honey, are you okay?" The door handle started to turn. I backed up until I hit the wall, a scream building in my throat. The door swung open. There was nobody there. I stood there, shaking, for what felt like hours. Eventually, I managed to peek out into the hallway. Empty. The whole apartment was empty. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat on my bed, lights on, jumping at every little sound. When the sun finally came up, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. I called in sick to work and went straight to the cemetery. I had to see the tombstone again, had to know if I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I got there, my heart nearly stopped. The tombstone was gone. In its place was a freshly dug hole, an open grave. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on something. I looked down and saw a shovel, a dirty, used shovel. And there, stuck to the handle, was a note, in handwriting I knew better than my own. "I'm coming home. Sarah. Wait for me." I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, constantly looking over my shoulder. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of something in my rearview mirror. A figure, standing by Tom's empty grave. A figure with messy brown hair and familiar green eyes. I'm at Lisa's place now. I can't go back to my apartment. I don't know what to do. Am I going crazy? Is this really happening? And the worst part, a small, terrible part of me wants it to be real. Wants Tom to really be coming back, even if he's not the same Tom I knew. God, what's happening to me? I'll update again when I can, if I can. Please, if anyone has any idea what's going on, help me. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It's been 3 days since I last posted. 3 days of pure hell. But I promised I'd keep you updated. So here goes. After I fled to Lisa's place, things got worse. So much worse. That first night at Lisa's, I woke up screaming. In my dream, I was back in the cemetery. Tom was there, standing by his open grave. But he wasn't the Tom I remembered. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes ... God. His eyes were empty, black holes in his face. He reached out to me, his fingers elongated and twisted like tree roots. "Sarah," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "Why did you leave me?" I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Lisa came running in, worrying etched on her face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth to answer, but then I saw it, there, on Lisa's bedroom wall. Words, dripping down the wallpaper like fresh blood. "I'm waiting for you, Sarah," I screamed. Lisa flicked on the lights, but as soon as they came on, the words vanished. Gone like they'd never been there ... Lisa thought I was losing it. Hell, I thought I was losing it, but I knew what I saw. The next day, things got even stranger. We went to the police station to file a report about the missing tombstone. The officer looked at us like we were crazy. "Ma'am," he said, tapping away at his computer, "according to our records, there's no Thomas Thompson buried at Oakwood Cemetery." My jaw dropped. "What? No, that's impossible. I was just there. I've been visiting his grave for a year." The officer shrugged. "I'm sorry, but there's no record of it." "Are you sure you have the right cemetery?" We left the station more confused than ever. On the drive back to Lisa's, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide from me, Sarah. I'm coming for you." I showed Lisa. She immediately turned the car around, heading back to the police station. But by the time we got there, the message had disappeared from my phone, like it had never existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom's face. Not the Tom I loved, but the ... thing from my dream. I sat in Lisa's guest room, lights on, jumping at every little sound. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, scratching, coming from inside the walls. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It got louder, more frantic, like something was trying to claw its way out. Then, a voice. Tom's voice, but wrong. Distorted. "Sarah ... Let me in. Sarah ... I backed into the corner of the room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The scratching got louder, and then, the wall started to bulge. I watched in horror as the wallpaper stretched and tore. A hand pushed through, gray, decayed, with long, twisted fingers. I screamed so loud I thought my throat would tear. Lisa came running in. The moment she opened the door, everything stopped. The hand disappeared. The wall was intact, like nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. I knew it was real. Lisa didn't believe me. How could she? It sounded insane. She suggested I see a doctor, maybe get some sleep medication. I nodded, agreed to whatever she said, but inside, I knew. This wasn't in my head. This was real, and it was only getting worse. Yesterday, I went back to my apartment to grab some clothes. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. It was cold, so cold I could see my breath. And the smell? God, the smell? Like wet earth and decay. I ran to my bedroom, grabbed whatever I could fit in a bag. As I was about to leave, I saw it, on my bed, a single red rose. And next to it, a note, "Till death do us part. Remember, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Every shadow looks like him. Every noise sounds like his voice. And now ... now I'm starting to wonder. What if ... what if I should let him in? What if this is my fault, for trying to move on? For not waiting for him? No, that's crazy talk. Right. I'm losing my mind. I know I am, but I also know this is real. Tom is coming back, and I don't think I can stop him. If anyone out there knows what's happening, please help me, please. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. I'll try to update again. If I can, if I'm still here, God help me." It started with the attic. We'd hear faint creaks and whispers, the kind that make you doubt your sanity. My wife, Jenna, insisted it was just the house settling, but I knew better. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again, only this time, it was louder. A dragging sound, like furniture being moved. I grabbed a flashlight and headed up, hoping to find a raccoon or some other explainable cause. The attic was empty, save for a few old boxes and cobwebs. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a door, slightly ajar, that I had never seen before. It was small, almost child-sized, and barely noticeable in the dim light. Curiosity got the better of me. I pushed it open and peered inside. The room was tiny, filled with dusty, antique furniture that didn't belong to us. A small table, a chair, and a mirror hung on the wall. But what really stood out was the old, leather-bound book on the table. I opened it, and the pages were filled with frantic, scribbled entries. The first one read, "The house moves. It shifts at night when no one is looking. The rooms change. The doors disappear. I'm not alone here." I shut the book, my heart pounding. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut behind me. I ran to it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as I banged on the door, calling for Jenna. Then, I heard it, the dragging sound again, this time much closer. I turned around and saw the small door slowly closing. I rushed to it, but it vanished before my eyes, leaving a solid wall in its place. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Desperation clawed at me as I pounded on the walls, screaming for help. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to blur. Finally, the attic door opened, and Jenna stood there, her face pale with worrying. I stumbled out, gasping for breath. I tried to explain what happened, but the attic looked normal again. The small door was gone, the room as empty as before. Jenna thought I was losing my mind, but I knew the truth. The house was alive, and it was playing with me. Over the next few days, things got worse. Rooms in our house would change places overnight. The kitchen would be where the living room was, the bathroom where the bedroom should be. Jenna and I argued constantly. She thought I was doing it to scare her, but I swore it wasn't me. One night, I woke up to find Jenna gone. I searched the entire house, but she was nowhere. Panic set in. I called the police, but they found no trace of her. They said it was impossible for someone to just disappear from a locked house. Desperate, I went back to the attic. The small door was there again. I opened it and stepped inside, hoping to find answers. The room was the same, but the book was gone. Instead, there was a new entry on the wall, written in what looked like blood. "She's here with me now." A cold dread washed over me. I knew I had to find her, to save her. But as I turned to leave, the door vanished again. The room grew darker, the air thicker. And then I heard it, Jenna's voice, faint and pleading, coming from the walls. The house had her, and now it had me too. If you're reading this, get out. Don't stay another night. The house is alive, and it will never let you go. Every house has its quirks, especially old ones. Mine, a dilapidated Victorian inherited from a grey tant I barely knew, had many. But none were as maddening or as haunting as the ancient grandfather clock in the hallway. From my first night, the clock disturbed me. Its ticking was loud, irregular, a cacophony of ticks and tocks that never quite synced up. I'd lie in bed, each tick a hammer against my skull, each tock an echo in an otherwise silent home. I complained about it to friends and family, half jokingly, but their laughter couldn't drown out the incessant noise. One evening, driven to the brink, I resolved to stop it. I approached the clock, its pendulum swinging with an exaggerated, almost mocking arc. I reached out to still it just to have some peace. But the moment my fingers brushed the cool, metallic surface, the ticking ceased abruptly. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. That night, the silence was oppressive, a stark, suffocating void where the ticking should have been. It felt as though the house was holding its breath. In bed, I tossed and turned, straining to hear something, anything. But there was nothing, just the heavy, expectant quiet. Then, past midnight, the quiet broke. A soft tapping began at my window. I told myself it was just a branch, the wind, anything normal. But when I pulled back the curtains, there was nothing there, no tree, no wind, just the still, dark night. The tapping moved, a slow, deliberate rhythm, from the window to the walls, encircling me. Frightened, I left my bedroom to check the house. The air was chillier than usual, my breath fogging in the moonlight streaming through the windows. The tapping followed me, always just behind. When I passed the hallway, I couldn't help but glance at the clock. It was working again, its pendulum swinging, but the face told a different time than before somehow, hours ahead. And with each swing, a new sound joined the symphony of taps, a faint whisper, echoing through the halls, words indistinct but tone desperate. I retreated to my study, locking the door, but the whispers grew louder, as if dozens of voices were now speaking just outside. The words became clearer, a litany of warnings, regrets, and names of people I knew, some I barely remembered, and others I wished to forget. The night stretched on interminably. By the time dawn broke, the voices faded, the tapping stopped, and the clock ceased again. Exhausted, I ventured out of the study. The house was silent, bereft even of the usual creaks and sighs of old wood. The grandfather clock stood motionless in the hallway. But on its face was a new inscription, one I swear wasn't there before. In silence, they return. I've tried to remove the clock, to sell it, even destroy it. But somehow, it always remains, steadfast in the hallway, ticking away. And sometimes, when the house believes I am asleep, it stops and the silence begins again. I've learned to live with the ticking, because in this house, silence is far, far worse